I declare this meeting open at 6:03 p.m. and welcome everyone to this public meeting. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person here this evening. It is my prayer that as elected representatives, we speak respectfully and consider the needs of all current and future residents, as well as the impacts on the environment in which we live. Tonight, I would appreciate it if everyone present in this room allows us to make decisions free of interjections so that we can make the best possible decisions in the community. In particular, I would like to call out a few rules and expectations. 1, we will have one person speaking at a time. The councillors will signal to me their interest and I will invite each of them to speak when appropriate. 2, the public has a right to attend this meeting as an observer. However, members of the public gallery are to observe in silence so as to allow the councillors to focus on decision making. 3, as per clause 5.31 of the Code of Meeting Practice, this council meeting is being recorded and it is being made available live via the council website. Only councillors and staff will be shown on camera. For the councillors participating in this meeting, I would also ask them under clause 5.30 to refrain from making potentially defamatory statements. 4, clause 2.1 of the Code of Meeting Practice outlines a principle for all meeting attendees to treat each other with respect and to behave in a way that contributes to the orderly conduct of the meeting. In particular, for councillors, this means that their speeches and questions should remain on topic and genuinely focused on exploring the issue at hand, rather than on casting other councillors or members of the public in bad light. As chair, I will be ruling speeches and questions as out of order if I believe that what is being said is not consistent with our meeting principles in clause 2.1. 5, if any councillor would like to raise a point of order, as per clause 15.1 of the Code of Meeting Practice, I ask that they turn on their mic and say point of order. I will then pause the timer and allow the councillor to raise their concern before I rule on whether it is a valid point of order. Now, in terms of apologies, we have 2. We have one from Councillor Kay for being unwell and another from Councillor Petet for family reasons. I seek a motion I move that these apologies be accepted and grant a leave of absence, and that is unanimous. Are there any apologies from staff?
Mr. Mayor, there are no apologies from staff.
Are there any conflict of interest declarations for councillors? Any? None? Now, are there any conflict of interest declarations for staff?
Mr. Mayor, there are no declarations of interest from staff.
Okay, now, I do note that there is one document that has been circulated to the councillors. Can you please expand, General Manager?
Mr. Mayor, there is a confidential email and attachments from the corporate lawyer relating to the TODP, dated 7 May 2024.
So I seek a motion that these reports remain in confidential. Please raise your hand to support that. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Okay, so we are now up to mayoral minutes, of which there is one. I'm not going to read the full mayoral minute, it's a bit long, and I'll take that as noted. However, I do have the following to say. Now, I've had 2 meetings with the Planning Minister in February and in May, asking for a 12-month extension similar to what he has given to other councils, and on both occasions he has said no. Fast forward to today, the transport-oriented development provisions are coming on Monday next week, and we have had residents ask us if we intend to stop or delay it through legal action. Legal advice has been provided to each councillor, though I caution that this legal advice is confidential and should not be publicly discussed. And what this motion seeks to achieve today is to give each councillor the opportunity to vote, once and for all, as to whether or not they believe going to court is the appropriate course of action. development applications may be coming in as early as Monday. I understand that some residents have not been keen for the costs involved with legal action, but the reality is that even if we had let this slide, we would have had to subsequently go to court with developers over ambiguities in the legislation. We were either going to incur the expenses now or incur it at a later point this year. In favour of incurring the expenses now, I think residents and owners alike deserve to know upfront what they can or cannot do with their land, and our role as government is to provide them with certainty. The other benefit of going to court now is if the SEP were to be set aside, we have an opportunity to identify appropriate places for public recreation, and that in the long run would save us a fair amount. At the same time, we've had many residents asking us why Council is not proceeding with identifying our infrastructure needs and revising our LEP. If the LEP is revised, the TOD provisions may be lifted. To date, we've had one vote on the matter 6 weeks ago. The scope applied to the entire LGA rather than these 4 TOD precincts in isolation, and it was voted down on the basis that LGA-wide targets have not yet been set. In last week's meeting with the Planning Minister, I asked if we can have long-term targets for the LGA, and he was not willing to commit to it. So on that basis, we are no closer to being able to do an LGA-wide LEP. At the meeting tonight, we are considering whether to conduct studies that focus on the 4 TOD precincts only. It is not as cost efficient to do it in this way, but the consequences of inaction may be far greater. And depending on how things play out, there's a possibility that the scope may be expanded in the coming months. Point C is deliberately set up so that different scenarios can be explored. With Gordon, for example, we could potentially save the Eraldine heritage context by removing density from its surrounds and shifting it to key sites in the centre of Gordon. Alternatively, Council may consider more extensive changes that save not just Eraldine, but multiple HCAs by shifting the density to non-heritage areas. We are not making decisions on which scenario to pick tonight. We are just asking staff to tell us what each scenario looks like at the right time. So, councillors, we have 3 items to vote on tonight, points A, B, and C. I've deliberately kept the 3 points separate so we can each vote with the information before us and according to our conscience. I now invite other councillors to speak, and first up, if there are any, Councillor Smith.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for bringing this meeting in this evening. I think it's important that as councillors here this evening that we've got the opportunity to stand up in front of the New South Wales State Government and really defend our residents of what is potentially looking at moving forward with these TODs. For these reasons, I think it's important that we take care of both. We take note that our heritage has been threatened, our tree canopies have been threatened, and our identity has been threatened with what has been proposed. It's not going to be so long till we have the low to mid-rise that we'll be dealing with, and that these matters should have always been dealt with under the same master plan. So for those reasons, I would love to see that everybody here this evening supports this. I think it's a great opportunity for us to stand up for our residents and to get a better outcome that's something that is more livable for people in Ku-ring-gai in the future. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
And just as a point of clarification for everyone, I'll take it that I have formally moved points A, B, and C, and that I've said that we are going to vote on each one in seriatim. So next up we have Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, can I thank everyone who's been involved with this EMC, and I thought it was needed to be dealt with as a matter of urgency, as we do not have the time for it to have been left to the ordinary meeting. I am and have always said that this sudden announcement by the New South Wales government has caused a lot of stress to residents in our area. The proposed TOD development plan will have a devastating impact on our heritage, tree canopy diversity, open space and the character of the 4 TOD sites. As a resident, I have mentioned on a number of occasions that I am not at odds with the state government, nor am I anti-development or so-called NIMBY. I support the government's initiative and believe that it is imperative for Ku-ring-gai to support and eliminate the housing crisis that we all face. What I have explicitly said is that I do not agree with the state's one-size-fits-all top-down housing policies and have requested that we ensure appropriate master plan is undertaken for new housing plans in Ku-ring-gai. I'm fully aware of the meetings held with the Minister and the Mayor in February and May. It is disappointing to learn that our requests have been flatly rejected. Why? Begs the question. We, the councillors, along with key staff, have discussed how best to approach the new TOD SEP to ensure best results for our community and wider community that are impacted. This includes revisiting plans that have been developed some 10 years ago but never implemented. How and when these can be revised or modernised in line with current needs. I, along with some councillors, have been proactive in identifying alternative sites and indeed asked the Mayor to suggest this to the Honourable Minister for his consideration. The answer, alas, no. It is important to note that the Honourable Minister was unwilling to give us long-term targets for low and mid-rise. So we're still in the same dilemma that we had before, having no targets to aspire to for LGA-wide LFP update. The commencement of any aspect of TOD development plan needs to be delayed until we are fully appraised of all government systems and processes were followed respectfully, giving the community confidence in the work the government is undertaking in relation to the housing crisis. Almost every day we hear that Australia's environmental loss is at a crisis level. Yet there appears to be no regard for this as part of the TOD, nor is this issue able to attract the same level of media attention and public awareness. In summary, while TOD represents an ambitious vision for Sydney and surrounding areas, balancing housing needs, heritage preservation, environmental sustainability remains a challenge for Ku-ring-gai Council as it navigates implications of TOD. An ongoing dialogue between the council, residents and the government is important, and we will shape the future development in this area so that a mutually satisfactory outcome can be achieved. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? Councillor Lennon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The responsibility of any representative government in our system is to represent its constituents. And as a municipality, as a council, I certainly feel that we've been doing that all the way through, and I know we will again tonight. In this case, I feel like we're representing not just the people of Ku-ring-gai, but the people of Sydney, of Newcastle, of the Central Coast, Wollongong, effectively all of New South Wales. My great disappointment is the state government is not representing its people. Among the many items of correspondence that we've received and conversations we've had was one that came into councillors today from a resident of Gordonwood, who quite rightly reminded me of Premier Bob Carr 20 or 30 years ago, taking this issue up with the federal government. He said Sydney is full. That was decades ago. Things got a lot worse since then. We should have a state government that, like Premier Bob Carr, stands up for this state, because the housing crisis is an invention of the federal government. It's not something that is cast upon us by God, it is cast upon us by the federal government. And we should be counting on a state government that responds on our behalf and is not a willing accomplice in the destruction of the city and of other parts of New South Wales. We want a state government that stands up for us. I'm very quick to condemn the state government for its failure to at least speak up as Bob Carr spoke. Bob Carr spoke very eloquently 20, 30 years ago of the failure of immigration to deal with skill shortages. He spoke of the need for us to control our borders. If we want net zero, we want net zero at the borders. That's the way we achieve it, and that is how we will end the housing crisis. Because as was also pointed out in that letter to us today, what is going on at the moment in the Australian economy is a Ponzi scheme. It's a fake economy. It doesn't exist. The only sustainable economic growth comes from improvements in productivity. And we have productivity going backwards. Congestion diminishes productivity. Infrastructure stresses diminish productivity. So we have this negative economy, and the federal government is a bit like a magician. On the one hand, it's getting us to look at gross numbers, big numbers, and making us think that there's some sort of economic growth. There isn't. Because with the other hand, we have diminution per capita. This is the federal government creating a housing crisis, and our state government has failed to stand up as Bob Carr stood up 25 years ago. Ponzi schemes always fail. They're unsustainable. And we can destroy more parts of Sydney with this SEP. The state government can destroy them with this SEP. And that will alleviate the issues for this year, but then there's next year. So what happens? The state government has destroyed Gordon and Clara, and then in a couple of years' time, destroys Ku-ring-gai, Tauamara, Asquith, Putney. When does it end? Ponzi schemes are unsustainable. The Australian economy, the current economic model in this country, is unsustainable. And we need a state government who's willing to stand up for the people, stand up for sustainability, stand up for economic growth per capita that is sustainable and meaningful. Not this Ponzi scheme of a fake economy that suits developers very well, but diminishes the quality of life of people across the city, now into the future. So I'm very pleased to support all the motions tonight as an effort to deal with this, to do what the state government is not doing. And that is to speak up for the people of the state. Thank you.
Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, there has been a lot of chatter and back and forth emails from the public. So I would like to address and speak to this motion in turn. So firstly, the EMC tonight is not a waste of time because time is of the essence, and it has to be called today to address this issue, which is extremely important. Now, my modus of operandi has not changed. I am result-oriented. I'm interested in what the outcome would be, and not so much, well, I do care about how we get there, but then I look at the result, the outcome, and then I weigh the cost-benefit analysis. Well, if you look at the public sector, you are talking about the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So there are certain things here that I may not agree with my colleagues, and I will address them and the issues in turn. So because we are voting in seriatim, in relation to point A, I would not be supporting that because I have actually denounced the state government's approach. Now, there is a distinction between criticizing the state government's approach and its implementation of the TOD, and the difference between that with what is needed to solve the housing crisis. And I am supportive of whether this government or the previous governments or the federal government's movement in solving the housing crisis. And I would have to say that it has been known that this is a bilateral view taken on both sides of the aisle. So it is not one party versus the other. Now, in relation to B, my concerns have been very public. I've raised all the concerns about costs and the result. Again, I'm result-oriented. And I was really concerned. I spent considerable amount of time on this particular topic because it affects all of us. I normally spend that much time and effort when it affects my ward, and I share the workload with my colleagues when it affects the entire LGA. However, I did spend a lot of time speaking to the corporate lawyer, the general manager, even before he was confirmed employed as a general manager, and I raised my concern again tonight in our confidential briefing from our solicitors. Now, I feel that my concerns have been addressed. My concerns have been addressed. I will not discuss the details of it because it is confidential, but I am happy and I'm comfortable with the discussion earlier regarding the legal action and the strategy that we are taking. And I think as a councillor, now again, I'm result oriented. I'm not really, as you know, in my history on this council, I have argued for and against, mostly against blanket listing of heritage and so forth. My position has not changed. However, I believe this warrants that action, and I will be supporting point B. Now, point C, it goes without saying. We need to look at ways on how we can come up with some ideas, for instance. I did say at a previous meeting that we have no targets. So can I have half a minute?
Let's finish your paragraph.
Okay, so we have no targets to work towards. However, I think we should start investigating now. Anyway, we are not confirming any targets and so on. And just one final point before I go, I think those who have sat in tonight's briefing would probably share my view that this is the right direction to go, and we should take this approach. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers? If not, I'll just close by saying that I do believe that Ku-ring-gai is capable of taking on more housing, but it's important that it be conducted in a planned manner and that it be appropriately supported by infrastructure that is funded. So let's put these 3 points to a vote. The first point, point A. For those in favour of point A, please raise your hands. And that is Councillors Lennon, Smith, Wheatley, Alec Taylor, Greg Taylor, Ward and Nye, and those against are Councillor Spencer. And that is carried. Now, point B is about commencing legal proceedings. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous. So declared carried. Point C, that Council commences studies around the 4 TOD precincts. All those in favour, that is unanimous. So I declare that carried. Now, there being no further business, I would like to thank councillors and staff. I would also like to thank members of the public for their attendance. The webcast of this meeting will be available on the council website and minutes will be published within the next 2 working days. I declare the meeting closed at 6:28 p.m.